633 Squadron is one of those war films that takes the viewer back to a very specific era of British cinema. Released in 1964, it was produced at a time when the memory of the Second World War was still strong in the public mind, and it is a film that blends real history with fictional storytelling in a way that is both thrilling and nostalgic. Directed by Walter Grauman, the movie tells the story of an RAF Mosquito squadron that is tasked with destroying a German V2 rocket fuel plant hidden in a Norwegian fjord. What makes the film especially notable is not only its stirring aerial combat sequences but also its tone, which reflects both the pride and the weariness of wartime Britain. In many ways, the film is remembered more for its iconic musical score and the spectacular use of real aircraft than for its story or characters. But when viewed in its full context, it offers an interesting insight into how the war was remembered 2 decades after it ended. The film begins with a sense of urgency. The Allies know that the Germans are developing and storing rocket fuel in a heavily protected plant, and if they succeed in bringing their new weapons to bear, it could spell disaster for London and other cities. The squadron chosen to carry out the mission is No. 633 Squadron, a fictional RAF unit equipped with the Havilland Mosquitoes. The Mosquito was a real aircraft from the war, made primarily out of wood, and it was famous for its speed and versatility. Seeing these planes in action is one of the great pleasures of the film because the production used real aircraft rather than models or effects. The story then focuses on Wing Commander Roy Grant, played by Cliff Robertson, who is brought in to lead the operation. Grant is an American flying for the RAF, which reflects the real cooperation that existed between Britain and the United States during the war. Grant is depicted as tough, pragmatic, and deeply committed to the mission, but at the same time he is haunted by the cost of war. This is where the film introduces its central tension, because the squadron is being asked to carry out a mission that is almost impossible. The German plant is located deep within a fjord, with cliffs on either side, anti-aircraft guns surrounding it, and only one approach and exit path for the planes. The viewer quickly realizes that even if the mission succeeds, it is likely that most of the men will not return. The film builds up this inevitability throughout its running time, showing the bravery of the pilots while also hinting at the futility of their sacrifice. Alongside Grant, there are secondary characters who represent the variety of men in the squadron. Some are British, some are from other allied nations, and all of them are shown dealing with the strain of constant operations. The script does not give them deep backstories in the way modern war films might, but each one is given at least a moment or two that shows their humanity. There is also a subplot involving a Norwegian resistance fighter who works with the squadron, and his sister, who becomes a romantic interest for Grant. This side story is conventional and predictable, but it gives the film an emotional anchor and helps connect the personal to the military. The real highlight of 633 Squadron is the flying sequences. Filmed with real mosquitoes flying in formation, diving through valleys, and attacking targets, the aerial combat scenes remain impressive even by modern standards. There is a physicality to the flying that cannot be replicated by computer graphics. The roar of the engines, the swoop of the planes over mountain ridges, and the smoke of explosions all contribute to an atmosphere of authenticity. The final attack on the fjord is staged with remarkable energy, and it is easy to see why later filmmakers, including George Lucas, were influenced by it when staging the Death Star trench run in Star Wars. The resemblance is striking, and Lucas himself acknowledged the debt he owed to 633 Squadron in shaping that famous sequence. The film's musical score, composed by Ron Goodwin, is another element that ensures the film's legacy. The theme of 633 Squadron is one of the most recognizable pieces of music associated with the Second World War in popular culture, even for people who have never seen the film. It is rousing, patriotic, and stirring, perfectly suited to the images of mosquitoes sweeping across the skies. In some ways, the score has outlived the film, being used in documentaries, advertisements, and even parodies. It represents the mood of the film in musical form, a balance of bravery, determination, and melancholy. Despite its strengths, the film does show its age in terms of character development and narrative structure. The dialogue can be stiff, and many of the characters are drawn as archetypes rather than individuals. The romantic subplot between Grant and the Norwegian woman is thinly written and feels more like a requirement of the genre than a natural part of the story. The film also carries a tone of inevitability that may strike modern audiences as overly fatalistic, because it does not shy away from the idea that most of these men are destined to die. This gives the ending a somber weight, but it can also make the story feel somewhat bleak. However, this tone is important to understand in the context of when the film was made. In the early 1960s, British war films often had a sense of realism mixed with heroism. The country was still recovering from the war, and there was a desire both to honor the sacrifices made and to present the war in a way that was serious rather than frivolous. 633 Squadron fits into that tradition. Unlike more light-hearted adventure films, it shows the grim cost of operations, but it also reassures the audience that such sacrifices were necessary and noble. The film was popular with audiences at the time, even if critics were divided, and it became part of the larger cycle of British war films that included titles like The Dam Busters and Reach for the Sky. From a historical perspective, the film is interesting because it is fictional but inspired by real events. The mission in the film resembles Operation Gunnerside and other real sabotage missions carried out in Norway, where resistance fighters and Allied forces worked together to disrupt German heavy water production. Heavy water was essential for the Nazi atomic program, and although 633 Squadron changes the details to focus on a rocket fuel plant, the inspiration is clear. In this way, the film dramatizes the kind of dangerous and almost suicidal operations that were part of the real war, even if it takes liberties with the specifics. Cliff Robertson's performance as Wing Commander Grant deserves mention. As an American actor playing an American pilot in the RAF, he brings a slightly different energy to the role than a British actor might have. He is less restrained, more openly emotional, and this creates a contrast with the British stiff upper lip tradition often seen in war films of the era. Some viewers may find him too earnest, but others may appreciate the humanity he brings to a role that could have been very one-dimensional. His scenes with the Norwegian resistance fighter and his sister add some warmth to the otherwise cold and militaristic tone of the film. When it comes to pacing, the film takes its time in building up to the final mission. The first half is devoted to training, planning, and character introductions. The second half is where the action intensifies, leading to the climactic assault on the fjord. Some modern viewers may find the first half slow, but it does serve the purpose of showing the scale of preparation and the weight of responsibility on the squadron. The final attack sequence then benefits from this build-up, because the audience understands what is at stake and what the cost will be. The ending of the film is both predictable and powerful. Without spoiling every detail, it can be said that the mission succeeds, but at terrible cost. The squadron is decimated, Grant himself does not survive, and the viewer is left with a sense of both triumph and loss. This mixture of victory and tragedy is central to the film's impact. It reminds the audience that even successful missions in the war often came with heavy casualties, and that the men who flew those planes were ordinary people asked to do extraordinary things. In terms of legacy, 633 Squadron occupies an interesting place. It is not as critically acclaimed as The Dam Busters, nor as widely known as later Hollywood war films, but it holds a loyal place in the hearts of aviation enthusiasts and fans of classic war cinema. The use of real mosquitoes is a major reason for this, because the aircraft themselves are stars of the film. Very few of these planes still exist today, and seeing them in action in 633 Squadron is like stepping back in time. Aviation fans continue to rewatch the film for this reason alone. Looking at it today, the film may not satisfy viewers who want deep psychological portraits of soldiers or complex moral questioning about the war. Instead, it offers a straightforward story of duty, sacrifice, and courage. Its strengths lie in its visuals and its music, while its weaknesses lie in its writing and characterization. But as a piece of cinematic history, it remains important. It influenced later films, it captured the imagination of its time, and it preserved the image of the mosquito for future generations. When viewed critically, one can say that 633 Squadron is more of an experience than a narrative. The story is thin, the characters are archetypes, but the feeling of flight, the roar of engines, and the stirring music create a mood that carries the viewer along. It is less about individuals and more about the collective sacrifice of a squadron. The inevitability of death, the nobility of duty, and the stark beauty of the Norwegian landscape all combine to create a film that lingers in the mind. Ultimately, 633 Squadron is a film about courage in the face of impossible odds. It honors the memory of the men who fought and died in similar missions, even if the details are fictional. It is both a product of its time and a film that influenced the future, particularly in the way action sequences were staged. Its flaws are clear, but so are its achievements. To this day, when the rousing theme music begins to play and the mosquitoes take to the skies, it is hard not to feel a rush of admiration for both the pilots and the filmmakers who brought their story to the screen.